All right, well, let's jump into the real reason we're here today. Another coaching conversation. This time, we're joined by the head coach of the Farmington Farmers, Toby Vallas. Coach, thanks so much for taking time to be here on View from the West.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me. I listen all the time. I know my kids listen all the time, so it's exciting to be on here.
Good, that's great. Mitch and I have talked about it over the last couple of years when the Prairie Land and the Lincoln Trail conferences merged. And Mitch and I kind of discussed it going into that season about, well, if, schools like Farmington, Elmwood, Brimfield, and other schools like that are joining and playing schools from the Lincoln Trail, we kind of just have to adopt everybody. We'll just kind of expand our listening area, expand our coverage area. And the one really great thing out of that is just getting some of these new friendships, forging some new relationships with coaches like yourself. And so it's been fun talking to you week in and week out, through the email or through the direct messages. And just it's been great, adding programs like Farmington. So we're glad to have you on the show here. When we jump right in, I want to ask you right away just about last season. Historic season for Farmington. It had been kind of building the last few years. The program continues to get better. But tell me about that class, that senior class, the team last year, because it was a special group, and you felt like maybe a game short of where you wanted to go. But what a lasting legacy! What an impact they made.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those special groups that come along, and you see them coming when they're little kids, and you're just waiting for them to get there. And they were a group. I always tell the story, but when they were sophomores, we went to Moreau Forsyth, and they weren't playing, and we just got our doors blown off down there. It wasn't one of our strongest teams, and a lot of people have been there and had that happen, and it was happening to us. And as we're walking in, I'm looking at these seniors who I love, and they're dejected walking in, and I hear these little sophomores talking about, well, when it's us, we're going to go to state, so it doesn't matter. And I just lost it on them, and I did. You guys have no idea what it takes, because it takes a lot. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes effort. It takes help by the parents, but it also takes luck. It does. And it's funny, like the next Monday we got to school, and those guys were knocking on my door going, okay, so tell us what it takes. We're ready to do it. And it was great to see, because they all stuck with it. We didn't lose any of the kids. They did what they said they were going to do, which is a rare thing sometimes now. And it was just really nice to see the rewards and have such a great season. And painful to be so close, but also great to be so close.
I hate to choose just one of those guys that you're just talking about, but certainly on this show, we were big fans of your quarterback, Lane Wheelwright, a two-time Conference Player of the Year from this show. When you get a player like that, do you have to maybe change your coaching philosophy, or how do you best utilize players that have a unique skill set like that?
Like with Lane, it was pretty easy because we had such a great relationship, and Lane really, I'll embarrass him here for a minute, but he was a kid when he was young. As a freshman, he'd never played quarterback, and then he started playing quarterback as a freshman, but he would get mad at his teammates. And to his credit, he came to me and he said, look, I want to be a good leader. I know that when things don't go right, I blame it on my teammates. I can't do that. How do I fix it? So he was just the kind of kid that picked out his own mistakes, worked at it. He had that habit broken in a year. And, but I think it shows you the kind of kid he is, that he recognized that about himself. And we would really just go through game plan stuff. And then we would ask him, what ideas do you have? And what things do you like that we have in here? What do you not like? And kind of pick and choose and go together and throw stuff out. But we were on the same page with everything from day one. And he was never afraid to speak up. And I want my players to do that. The last thing I want to do is have the game on the line and me call something that they don't really like, but they were too nice to tell me. So we want to make sure we call the right stuff.
Well, and just keep it on that track. When you have an offense that, I don't want to say is built around Lane, but certainly you were utilizing his skills to the fullest, and then he gets hurt. How do you as a coach, at a pretty critical point in the season, what kind of went into how you prepared for that and moved forward without him for a few weeks?
We cried for a little bit, and then we but after we got done pouting, we have a kid named Brody Evans that's also a senior, and man, what a kid, didn't play very much, and then when we needed him, he came in at quarterback. Man, Jack Grumwald got hurt. He came in at safety, and he made huge play after huge play for us. So I think that was critical, but we really did I got to credit the kids and some of my offensive coaches, because we went from a run pass team that really relied on Lane running a lot to, I mean, Lane really couldn't run at all. Even through the playoffs, he really could run straight ahead for 4 or 5 yards. But if you saw him early in the season, the things he was doing, he was a total game changer. And I mean, for us to play in the semifinal and be close, and he was hurt. Jack Grunwald could barely play, arguably 2 of our best players. But I think that our kids' ability to adapt, and like we had Logan Hutt was a running back for us, and he just kind of said in the playoffs, put it on my back, and I'm going to take it over. And he did. Jarrett Fowler, Carter Lambden. It was really one of those storybook things where the guys who had kind of played second fiddle just really stepped up and took over. So that's what you want on a team.
Did you ever check if Carter Lambden set a school record for most blocked kicks?
He set a school record because he's on the IHSA list, so he's up there. But it's crazy. He just had a knack for it. He just had a knack for it. So
we talked about it, but like, is that something that you coached into him? Is that something that he just had a knack for, or like, because it's a pretty unique. I mean, I don't remember in the 5 years, Mitch, you could back me up. I don't remember talking about somebody blocking that many kicks or punts on special teams. I just don't,
So we'd draw him up, and when we did, he'd block them, and then when we didn't draw him up, he'd block them. So I think it was Carter more than us. He just some kids just have that knack for it, and he really did. So
yeah, we mentioned a little bit about Logan Hutt, but tell me about him kind of being he was a workhorse. He really he got the dirty yards or the ground and pound yards in there when Lane was getting a lot of the attention and Jack Grunwald's getting attention. But man, Logan Hutt he could be somebody you rely on.
Logan Hutt, I always say this about Logan. You could beat Logan with a baseball bat and he wouldn't care. Like, he'd still play. There was a point, and this is I swear this is true. He came off the field, he was running real awkward, like almost like bow-legged. And I said, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "My leg just sometimes it doesn't work." I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, sometimes my leg, it just doesn't work. Just hold on, I got to tighten this thing." And he had some sort of strap he'd tighten around his leg, and he'd go back out there and play. So, but he played hurt the year before, and he was just one of those guys that, Lord knows what's really wrong with him, but he wasn't going to tell you, and he was just going to play. And just one of the tougher kids I've ever had. So,
not just him, but I'm sure a lot of guys in that group and in your program. What does it mean to see commitment, just to know that they're buying into what you're putting out there, what your coaches are putting out there, and it's that total team effort. That's the goal as a head coach, but you never know if you're going to fully get it.
Yeah, and I've been very fortunate here because our kids have bought in all the way, and I think it's not just buying in. It's flattering to say buying into me, but I think it's buying into each other and put it all out there. And it's one place where kids come out there and they know, look, we're committed. We're going to put it all out there. Win, lose, or draw, we're putting it all out there. And if at the end of it isn't good enough, then I'm going to tell you I didn't do good enough for you, but we're going to put it all out there. And our kids have done that. Not just, the biggest difference now in the last few years is they're not just doing that on game nights. Now they're doing it in the weight room. First they started doing it in practice, but then now it's came to the weight room and in speed training and all that stuff. They realize that stuff is just as important.
Yeah. Well, Coach, we've talked a lot about your players from this year. I want to go way back and talk about you as a player. So I read recently, I didn't realize that your freshman head coach was Tim Engelbretson, who went on to be the head coach for Monmouth Warren and then had great success at United High School. In their first year as a consolidated school, they won a state championship. So, great coaching career, great legacy from him. What do you remember about him as your freshman head coach?
A ton. So we're still really good friends. We talk, every couple of weeks, and I learned so much from him as a player. But it's funny that when I had him, I thought he was really unfair to me for a while. And I'm not kidding. Like, I would come home and be upset because I thought he was too demanding of things. And then, it was a miserable 5 or 6 first games. And then all of a sudden I started to make plays. And I thought, oh, he wasn't too demanding. He wasn't mean to me. He just saw something better in me than I saw in myself. And that's probably the biggest thing I learned from him is like the power of having someone believe in you. And that's really what high school sports boil down to. When you see a kid believe in himself and do something that he didn't think he could do, that's worth a lifetime, And he was the guy that did that for me. And that's something you don't repay. It's just something that you hope to pass on. And you see that with so many kids, they just lack the confidence. And I was one of them to really believe that about yourself. But he demanded that from me. And I really, behind his back, I cussed him a lot those first couple of weeks. But in the end, like he's an unforgettable part of my life still as a coach. So.
Is an experience like that or having a head coach like that something that got you maybe steered towards becoming a coach yourself, or how did you know, or when did you know that you wanted to be a football coach?
So I think so. I was the first one in my family to ever go to college, and I just was not around a bunch of professionals. So in all honesty, I headed toward teaching because I really thought in my mind, I really thought all you really could be is a nurse or a teacher, because that's all I really knew. If you weren't going to swing the hammer, that's what you were going to be. So I went into teaching, but I would definitely say that Coach E was a big impact on me. But I'll also say my head coach was a guy named Dave Bass, and I don't know if you guys know him or not, but he spent some time at Tolono Unity for a while and some other places, and he was a great line coach, great coach, very passionate about it. But I mean, when I was going to be a senior, he wanted to revamp and throw the ball. So this is like 1993. Nobody's throwing the ball, right? And we're going through stuff. And he let me put together these playbooks. We had like 25 playbooks in a binder, and we had to draw the plays in with marker, and copy them and whatever. And then he's like, well, do you think we should do this on this route? Or what do you think about that? That's all it took. I mean, that's all it took. From that point on, every notebook I had was full of different plays, which none of them would have worked. But I drew them all up, and but those two guys are probably the most responsible for me going in to coaching. But I'll tell you, we made that playbook, and that was it. But I was a track first guy before football. I love track. That was my favorite sport. So,
well, with all the attention being brought, and for good reason, to the speed training, I guess a question I didn't have drawn up right now, but talk about as a track first guy at one point, now a football coach. How have you noticed that importance of speed training that, I know we talk about it a lot on this show, that Lena Winslow does it very well. Head coach Rick Arend has really bought into it. And then at Camp Point Central, almost a mirror image of that program, they're doing the same thing. That Brad Dixon program is huge into speed training. What have you seen as a track guy as well that has benefited you?
So I would say, like, I almost came from the opposite angle of it, because my background was so track based. I mean, I coached track for one of my best friends is my college track coach, and he was a brilliant guy, has had a tremendous effect on me. I probably at first was too far the track way and not enough lifting for mass, because there is a big difference between track and football, and it's that you're running into somebody, right? So you got to have a little bit, there's a little bit of common ground there. And I think I probably came the other way, and it took me longer to get the part that everybody else had, I guess, the strength training part, which is weird, but I think it's cool that everybody's buying into it now. And I think kids are going to enjoy it more. I mean, it never made much sense to me. I'd watch these weight room guys, and a kid could bench 300 when he was a junior, and they spend the whole next year getting him to 305. Like, let's work on something else. So.
Hey, Mitch, I'll put you on the spot, because you were a football quarterback, and then you went to St. Ambrose and ran track. So were you a speed training guy or a workout guy?
Well, I only started running track my senior year.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, I think Coach is right. It's two wildly different things, but there's a Venn diagram there, right? You find that intersection where they can meet. So yeah, I was a little bit opposite, where I was football first, then I came into track. But certainly the schools that you mentioned and a lot of schools that we cover have adopted that recently, and certainly with Lena and Farmington and Camp Point Central and whoever else, you see that translates pretty easily.
Mitch, I set you up to say I excelled at all of it. I did both all the time.
I would have been. I'm not going to lie to you, Greg. Yeah. Coach, you took over Knoxville in 2003, return home for you, but at that time that program hadn't been to the playoffs in a while, 13 years or so, in the midst of an 18-game losing streak. What factored into taking that job, and what did you see coming into that?
I always wanted to be there. Like, I had such great memories of being there, even though, we were, truth be known, I don't tell a lot of people this. My class was probably the one that started all that losing, but I always wanted to be there. I had such a great experience there, such a great place to grow up. And looking at it now, I would advise somebody, don't take that job. That same year they started this $100 activity fee because we didn't have any money, so every kid had to pay $100. We were out raising money for that, and we were in a tough conference. So I want to say my first game was against Coley Welter, defending state champion at Aledo. My second game was against Scott Hamilton, Toledo Unity, who's, won 80% of his games. My third game was against Coley Welter again. We played them in a conference game. It was a rough start. Pat Elder was on that schedule, who's been to state.
Wow.
You name it. Kelly Sears was on that schedule. BJ Zalesnik was on that schedule. I mean, you want to name a who's who of coaches. Rick Amy was on that schedule. It was a who's who of who could pound me that year. And I accepted it from everybody that first year. So,
yeah.
In fact, my first win ever was against Farmington. So, if that makes sense.
Wow. There's some trivia for you.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned it. You go from, one win in that first season, but the second year you're 9-3. What led to that turnaround? What did you see throughout that first season into that off season? Did you know things were about to flip? Or
so I was the JV coach, and I coached those kids as freshmen. Then I coached them as sophomores.
Yeah.
Then the job came open. I coached them as juniors, and I think what they had to learn was we gotta work in the weight room. And I mean, it was, when I say kids have lifted, I've never seen a group lift like that group. I remember coming in the locker room, and this is, around Christmas time, and they're sitting on the floor because they didn't know if they had enough energy to drive home yet, because that's how hard they were lifting every night. And I mean, it just took what it took. And it was such a close group, coaches and kids. And it really just came down to the kids wanted to do it so badly. Like, I really believe that. Like, the kids wanted to do it so bad. That class will always be special, because nobody thought they could do it. I remember we had our scrimmage, and, my first year, we actually lost our offensive scrimmage because we fumbled and lost 6-0. But my second year, we had a great scrimmage. And I remember people walking out of there and some people saying, well, they're better, but they'll win 2 games. Somebody saying, no, it's the same old stuff. And somebody said, man, I think they're pretty good. And you got to prove it, and we had to prove it against some good guys. And that group just had a knack for winning close games. And they just were so physically just tough and just mentally tough. That was the difference. If I had known what the hell I was doing then, we'd have been a lot better. But I was 26 years old. I didn't know anything,
Well, that kind of leads us to our next question. What lessons did you learn that early in your career that we talked about that first season, and or at least your first season, your second season, but those early years of your coaching career, how did you develop yourself as a coach?
So I'll say, like, the first season, the first thing I really learned was, holy cow, film study changes everything. Because I was the guy as the JV coach that said, oh, this kid runs a dive, this kid catches the pitch, I'm going to lead block this. And those coaches I named off a minute ago, they were on that before I was. And none of it was going to work. So you had to really get back to, the fundamentals of it all. And you had to be able to really physically beat them. You weren't going to trick them. It just wasn't going to happen. And especially then, that was a pre-throw the ball time, which really, I mean, it was just, you were just going to go to war with each other. So I think that was the biggest thing, is like that film study, and how are you going to hide things, and how are you going to change things? How are you going to be balanced enough? The first lesson I actually learned as coach, I actually kept a notebook when I was a player of just different things that I knew. And the first thing I learned, and the first thing I really put in as I was a head coach, is like, don't let a week 1 loss cost you week 2. And I think you still see that a lot. You see a talented team that gets shocked in the game or loses a close game. And then I think that next game is really on, my coach that I had in high school, he cared about it so much. And I think sometimes that can be a detriment, because you take that loss so hard that you I don't want to say pout if that's the right word, but you let that pain seep into the next week, and it cost you the second game. And I watched that happen to us one game my senior year in high school. We came out, we thought we were going to beat Sherrard, I think it was, and then we came out and really the season went downhill after that because, we had them down by like 20 and we ended up losing, and you just got to turn the page. Kids got 9 games a year; they're guaranteed 9. You got to give them, you got to give them the best. And I think it's a trap that coaches who really care about their kids can fall into because it's so painful. Yeah. And then I guess other things I learned. I think that a lot of times when I was at Knoxville and I was young coaching, I kind of forced us to play by rules that everybody else didn't play by. That makes sense. Like, hey, we're going to run it this many times. We're not going to throw this. We're not going to, we don't split guys out that way. I'll do anything now. Like, what does it matter? And I think the games became that way. I think coaches have changed a lot over the years, and coaches will do anything. But if you say, hey, we're not, I realize now, if you say, this is not the way we do it, the guy on the other side of the field knows that too. That's just something he doesn't have to defend. So you got to be able to do anything, I think. But the biggest lesson I learned is coaching in your hometown is really hard. And it was rewarding. I'll never forget that 2004 team. But I mean, if you can do it in your hometown, I think you can do it anywhere, because I think there's so much inside you that wants to do well for people. I mean, part of the reason I got out of there is I saw my own best friend's kids coming up. It's not going to go good. It's, there's not a positive to be gained from there. And I love those guys, and we're still friends. I don't know if we would have been had I stayed, and I just, it was the right thing for me. But I have tremendous respect for those people that stay in their hometown and coach the whole way through like that, because it's hard. It's hard. It can be lonely. I know at Farmington, I'm sure people say bad stuff about me, but nobody comes and tells me like they always did at Knoxville, and it's an easier place to live because of that. So,
yeah. I had read the article from the Galesburg Register Mail when you stepped away at Knoxville. Actually, our good friend of the show, Aaron Fry, wrote the article. He was on the last episode here. So kind of an interesting turn of events there. But in the article, you referenced being, feeling burned out at the time, after 9 years in Knoxville, and you kind of referenced why, right? Right here.
Yeah, it wasn't fun anymore. And I really thought I was done coaching, but I just needed a change. And they will drag me off the field now. Like when people always ask me, when are you going to be done? When they make me, when they make me, I'll be done. So, but I just think it wears you out because you want to do so much for the people that did so much for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes that can be unproductive,
Yep. Well, before we talk about maybe that transition from Knoxville to Farmington, talk about, you turned that Knoxville program around, and after you left, that continued, and it, kind of even went to the next level where it was consistently playoff every year. What did it mean to you to see Ryan Hebard take over the program and kind of continue what you had rebuilt? And now to know that up until the last, maybe last year, it was consistently a playoff team.
Yeah, well, Ryan was there with me the entire time too, so he deserves as much credit as I do for that start. But there was not a doubt in my mind that that's what was going to happen. I mean, he loves football, loves Knoxville. He is the definition. If you look up Grinder, his picture should be in there. That's what he is, and that does not surprise me, And I mean, I know he's battled a lot of things there that were off the field that limited his program with some things, and he just continued to work and fight right through it. So makes you very proud. I think everybody has a soft spot for their hometown, and Knoxville is definitely my second favorite team, and I hope they go 8-1 most years. So.
Yeah. Well, talk about the next coach in line. I know you're familiar with Marty Turner as well. So he's the new head coach out there at Knoxville.
And Marty's going to do great. So I've known Marty since he was a little kid. I actually was really good friends with his sister in high school. And I remember him being a little kid. And the first time we ever did anything football related, I beat him in Tecmo Bowl, and he teared up. He teared up a little bit. It's probably not fair to say because I think he was like 7 or 8, but he was upset. But Marty tore his ACL when he was a senior, and I was the fresh soft coach. And so I just asked our head coach and our AD, I said, he's not doing anything but standing on the sidelines. Let me bring him down and make him part of my coaching staff with the fresh soft. And he came down and called plays with me and did stuff like that. And then as he went to college and got out of playing, he started to come back and help coach with us. But Marty has the right mentality for it. He's got the right disposition for it with the kids. And Marty's humble. He's always wanted to learn. And that's one thing about him. He's not afraid of anything. He wants to learn it. I think he's going to do really, really well. I just can tell when I talk to him, he's ready to go.
Did you use a Bo Jackson to dominate a young Marty Turner in Tecmo Bowl? Is that what happened?
It may have happened. It may have happened.
I love it. Mitch, what do you got?
Yeah, Coach, we referenced, you left Knoxville, but I'm curious on your time away and what led you to Farmington and make that decision to kind of jump back in.
So it's weird. I came to Farmington as an assistant principal, and I thought, I'm done with all this. And I remember like that summer, I didn't think about it. It was a great summer. And then the first game, like the kids were wearing their jerseys in the hallways. I was like, And you walk outside one day and you smell that fresh cut grass. And you start, to me, that's football. The grass, everybody else is like, oh, it's summer. No, that's football. That's a smell of football, right? And, I watched some of the games and the season went okay, but the closer it got, the less enamored I was with administration. And when a teaching job opened, I just moved over into it and got back into coaching football and track again. So, but it was a good. And I moved in as an assistant, as D coordinator for a year before that coach retired, and it was a good experience for me.
Okay, and so by my count, this will be your 12th year as head coach.
Yeah, probably something like that. Right? Yeah, somewhere there. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's just say it's 12.
Okay.
We see so much now in our game of low numbers. Certainly, that's not always football related. Sometimes that's just how communities grow and shrink a little bit. But Farmington has seemingly been a program that always has numbers. Your sideline is full of kids. What goes into that, right? Is that something that make sure you're starting at the youth programs, or what? How can you?
So I think my first year we finished the season with like 39 kids in 2014, I think, and then going into the 16 season, I want to say we had 70 something. And that was kind of before we started winning. We were like 5-4 those 2 years, but before we'd really won, postseason stuff. But I think the biggest thing is we changed. Like we took a hard look at the things we were doing, and that's not easy for football coaches, right? We like to look at other people's stuff and blame them, but there was just some stuff that we were doing because it made us feel better, and it wasn't necessarily making the kids feel better. And the other one's playing the game, I always wanted to get the games 2 hours early so I could look around, make sure things looked right, and worry myself. And all it did was make the kids nervous. And I just sat down and talked to some of our kids. We had some kids, Colton Evans and Max Bologna, and guys that were really bright kids. And I said, what do you guys want? And they just sat down and told me. And I said, well, that's what we're going to do. But I think the game-changing thing for us is we are really vested in social emotional learning. We learn everything we can learn about dealing with kids with trauma, and we learn everything we can learn about kids in poverty. Because we're almost 50% poverty. Those kind of schools don't go to state. I mean, you can rack your mind on schools that go to state, but they're fairly wealthy. We're not a wealthy school. So we gear everything toward how do kids in poverty think? And I know because I was a kid in poverty. I know because I suffered trauma. And I can relate to those kids, but I got every coach of mine is trained in trauma training and how to deal with kids in trauma. And that's become a culture of our program. We send social emotional screeners out in the middle of the season and at the end of the season to make sure we're meeting the needs of the kids. Everybody says, oh, you have 100 kids. I'll tell you right now, there's 20 some kids on my team that don't have an interest in playing or are there because they need something to eat. And that's okay because they fit in. But there's a number of different things that we've done intentionally that I think have led to higher numbers.
Coach, what's really impressed me, about kind of following your program is the seemingly the culture you build. And we talked about the buy-in from the players and the numbers that come along with it. And, I've seen, read about, heard you talk about, the leadership and building leaders within your program. Give us, some of the philosophies, or give us some of the overarching themes that you feel like are really vital to a successful program, not even involving X's and O's, but just building leaders, building good young men.
So a couple of the biggest things that we do an all school lifting program. We don't lift, football doesn't lift at this time, basketball at this time. We lift all the boys together while the girls practice, and then the girls lift while the boys go out in the summers. And that has built such camaraderie in our school. Like, you don't hear like people going, "Oh, the baseball team's terrible." They don't say that because they are the baseball team. Like, their best friends on the baseball team. They're, the guy they line up to at tight end is on the baseball team. So you don't hear them knocking each other like I've heard at other schools. Like, that all just started to go away when we started doing that. When we started doing the all school lifting. And what really started happening is, you guys asked me, before about different players and games and stuff like that. One of the players that I would mention is Eric Higgs, and he was an all-state football player and basketball player, but he never played football until his junior year. And when he came out and said, "I'm going to play football," it changed our entire program, because everybody said, "Whoa, the stud basketball player is going to play football?" And then he broke his collarbone. And you can imagine the basketball coach wasn't displeased with that, but he had a little argument with his parents, and his parents are great people. And they said, "I just don't know if you should do this, play your senior year." And he said, "Then I won't play anything." He's like, "I got to play. I owe it to these guys. We're a team." And he came back out and was an all-stater that next year. And I think that really changed how our kids looked at our program. Had another kid, Jaden Rutledge, that was a basketball only starter as a freshman. He came out as a junior and ends up getting a full ride to McKendree, as the tight end. So I think those things really changed our program. The other thing I'll say is we treat freshmen a little bit differently. Like, there's a lot of stuff where, freshmen are going to carry the bags, they're going to do this, that. They don't do that for us. Like, we treat our freshmen as guests. Because, like, if you had somebody on your recruiting visit, you wouldn't tell them, "Hey, carry the bags and do this and that." Your whole freshman year is just getting acquainted with the program. You earn the right to carry the bags as a sophomore. You earn the right to clean the house. But freshmen are just going to be our guests all the way through. And if they screw up, of course they screw up. Is there something wrong with them? Yes, they're 14. There's something wrong with everybody that's 14, right? I don't know about you guys, but I've lived with somebody that's 14 here recently, and it's not easy, right? So
I have a 14-year-old in my house. Well, about to be 14 this summer. So I know exactly. Yeah. And he's a freshman. He's going to be a freshman boy. So yeah.
Well, it's almost 10 o'clock. So you hope he's still in here. You think he's still in your house, but anyway.
Yeah.
And then, like, we're always direct with our criticism. Like, just tell them. Like, I just pull them aside and I just tell them, "Hey man, your attitude is not good enough. It's not going to work." Or, "Hey, you're really just not you're not good enough at that. You're going to have to get a lot better at it." And I think our kids just took to that for some reason. Like, "Hey, he's just going to tell me. They're just going to tell me if I'm not good enough at it." There's no playing games. There's no, "I don't want to hurt your feelings." You just tell me. Sometimes they tell me stuff I don't want to hear, and you take it. So, but I think that, and then we do a thing called Thursday recognition, and I think it's been really big for us. When I was at Knoxville, I thought it was all about practice. We're going to practice on Thursday, fine tune, then they're going to go have a team dinner, and we're going to act like everything's all right. On Thursdays here, we'll show like a quick video. My favorite one is the one of Jason Witten retiring with the Cowboys, and he goes through this great play that he ran, right, and explains it. But then at the end, he gives credit to everybody else. So then we'll stand up after we watch that and we'll say, "Who's somebody here that has attention to detail, or who's somebody that deflects credit and gives it to somebody else?" And a senior will stand up and he'll nominate somebody, and then they'll nominate somebody else. By the end of it, 8 kids are nominated. But the minute a sophomore gets nominated by a senior, or a freshman gets nominated by a senior, they're yours. They're yours for 4 years. Because that feeling, coach can tell you whatever, mom and dad can tell you whatever. There is nothing as powerful as your teammate telling you, or an older kid telling you something great about you. And I think that's really helped change us. But I think those things have really helped our kids. Like, I always tell kids, like, you don't have to be a leader of the whole team. You just have to be a leader of yourself. And if you could lead yourself, more and more people jump in.
I want to touch on your coaching philosophies a little bit more, and this is a question that I've been curious with a lot of coaches, and we've asked coaches this before. Certainly, the landscape of the game has changed a lot in your time. Like you mentioned earlier, 93, the forward pass was barely invented in 93. It seemed like in Illinois. So over the years, how do you adapt a philosophy for your teams, but also how do you adapt that? Is it by personnel? Is it by what other teams you've seen have successes with? How do you keep your program fresh, but also, how do you keep it Farmington traditional?
So I've screwed this up before because I've tried to keep it so fresh that I think I've confused it. That's the truth. Like, at times I tweaked a little bit too much, but I had a coach in track named Roger Haynes at Monmouth College. He's the athletic director now, and he was just a phenomenal coach. And he was a phenomenal coach in 1992. But by 1998, when I was there, he wasn't doing any of that because he'd evolved. And he's still a phenomenal coach today, and he's not doing anything he was doing in 98 because he's evolved. And I think it's important to never be afraid of change. Change is your friend. Change is what keeps you up. But in coaches, I think that's different. You want to marry what got you there. And when the game changes, you have to change with it, I think. And that's the biggest thing. How I got to the spread offense from the wishbone, you're going to want to slap me for saying this, but I think I got so, I don't want to say burned out. I wasn't burned out I still love the wishbone. I love every type of football. Like, you name it, I love it. But I got so worked up about caring so much about it. I said, you know what? We're just going to try it and see if it works. And I've got some guys, some real good friends of mine that are coming over for the draft that are quite a few years older, be the old cronies in town, They all thought I was going to fail. They were over there cussing me for the first 2 years because they thought it would get to work. And the truth is, I didn't really know. I just knew that I wanted to try what I thought would work and just see if it worked. And we got in it. There were other people doing the spread, obviously, but for small schools, we were in it pretty early, I think, so.
Well, what did work, or talk me through a little bit of the growing pains and what was kind of the spark maybe where, okay, yes, this is what I envisioned. Now it's working,
So I will say, like, even when we switched offense, the biggest thing to overcome was the mental barrier. So when you asked me about games, in 2015, we went up to Mercer County. And in 14, they beat us soundly. They were coming off a state championship, I believe, and we lost. But in 15, we lost to them by like 7, and we were better than them. But we lost to them because they were Mercer County, and we were just Farmington. And we sat in the end zone, and I told those kids, I said, you let yourselves down because we're better, but you just were afraid to win. You were just afraid of them. And I really think, like, that is the night that we started to become Farmington, because after that, things just started to click. And this is going to sound crazy, but for the first 3 years I was the coach, we only ran one running play. We ran the same running play, just 2 different guys carried it. That's it. And we threw the ball. And I know people thought it was nuts, and it probably was, but we just did different variations of it, and really not that many variations of it. But we just said, we're going to get good at throwing the ball because I'd never thrown the ball before. And by 16, Dylan Hayden, who ended up being the Journal Star Player of the Year, and now he calls plays for me. But, by 16, he threw 48 touchdowns that year. So it was, we got the right kids in there at the same time too. And that mattered as well. But I think we went slowly and changed slowly early. And then sometimes I think we changed too much, but the first thing I do is I find out what my offensive line's good at. And that's what we're going to run, what they're good at and what they like. And then I'm going to find out what my quarterback can do. And then we're going to do that. And everybody else is going to kind of fit in. Like, when I pick our team, I find 5 linemen and the quarterback, and then everybody on defense, we're going to figure the rest out. So.
Well, in staying with that kind of how you tackle evolving your group, where do you take inspiration from, your coaching influences? Are you looking at other high schools you play against? Are you looking into college? Or you said you're watching the draft. Are you watching NFL film? Like, where do you personally as a coach find your influences?
So, like, the NFL is too complicated for me. Like, there's so much going on out there, and like all these, they got five-man boxes. We've got everybody stopping the run and just playing the pass in high school, right? So But I am a huge Chip Kelly fan. You know, everybody always says, well, Chip Kelly bombed in the NFL. I saw a guy that won a lot of games without a quarterback. That's what I saw when he was in the NFL, you know, and I love that he's evolved over the years. I love how fast paced he goes. Just those Oregon teams I really was a big fan of. So I always liked him. Like now, honestly, there is so much football on Twitter. You don't even have to turn on the TV because there is just my algorithms are all messed up too. So that's all it is. But there's just so much football on Twitter. I think you can find about anything you want. And I've got a staff full of really young guys. So they're always full of ideas and stuff. And they're fun to talk about on Sunday. And then we kind of go back to what we think the kids are most comfortable with.
Talk about that transition. You know, you talked about your, Peoria Journal-Star quarterback, player of the year, now your offensive coordinator. Talk about kind of that transition of, working with him as a player. And now, I'm sure you were talking a lot of scheming with him as a quarterback, but now as a coordinator, it's a little bit different. But how has that kind of been fun, that relationship evolving?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, he's my offensive coordinator, and I'm probably lying if I say 25. And my D coordinator is Caleb Plattenberger. So what's the restaurant up there that they own? Pizza and Manny's. His grandparents own Manny's. So I know you guys go there. So
yeah,
but he's my defensive coordinator, and he's from up West Carroll. But he's like 25. Him and his wife just had their first baby, but they're almost like I'd like to say older brother, but they're almost like my own kids, And it's really been rewarding to watch them grow up and to have their own ideas, and to, Dylan always went with me on ideas. And then one day he said, I don't know about that. And that, to me, I was like, but that's what you want. Like, that's growing up. Then that's starting to form your own ideas. And those guys, they do a lot of that now. And that's a good thing. It's a good, healthy discussion. And I don't need people that are going to tell me what I want to hear. I want to hear what they know. And it's been a really special thing watching those guys grow up.
So we've touched on previous players. We've touched on some of the teams. You mentioned that 04 team. Are there any games in your history that stick out more than others that you think about? That left an impression on the program, maybe?
Oh yeah, I think in 2015 we lost to Elmwood 77-64.
Oh.
And it was a crazy game. We could not stop. They were running, and we were throwing and running. And I think our quarterback had like 550 total yards or something crazy running and passing. And it was just a nuts game. But I remember, and Todd Hollis and I are really good friends now. And we were hot and cold then, but we're really good friends now. But I remember he called me the next day and he said, I got to tell you that you and your staff are onto something. Like, you did a great job. And that meant a lot to me. Like, to have another coach call you after a game like that. But I think that instantly told our kids, like, we can compete with anybody, because we weren't even in the same hemisphere with them the year before. And I think that mattered. And we knew that our personnel was going to get better from then on. But I think that was a huge game. I also think the 2016 game when, the year before I got here, we played Winnebago in the playoffs, and they blitzed us. They were really good. But all I heard, everybody was like, well, you'll never beat Winnebago. Who did we draw? First round. You go 9-0 and you draw Winnebago from the Big North, and that's a terrible draw out of the Prairie Land at that time, right? And I felt like we'd outplayed them. We only ran for 50 yards the entire game, but we threw for like 485. And we were in the game, and they came down, scored with a minute left, and then we threw a bomb and won the game. And it was crazy, but it was just like, when you have great players, like Eric Higgs was the receiver, Dylan Hayden was the quarterback, and when you have great players like that believe they can do it, you just got to let them loose. Just let them do their thing. And lots of times I think coaches, a lot of us get a lot of credit, but really just get out of their way. Let them go. Don't hold them back, And I think that really got our young fans, our young kids, to want to play football.
One game, I guess, and it's so fresh, was this year, the Rock Ridge game. Certainly that game had a lot of hype. Two great quarterbacks going at it, two great teams going at it. weather turns on you. It's a sloppy game. I mean, what was that day like? Because there was a lot of people, including this show, hand up. We thought Rock Ridge was going to win that game.
Well,
And you overcame the elements, turnovers, all that. What did you learn about your kids that particular playoff game?
Just resilience. I mean, we snapped the ball over our D coordinator.
It was like the second play of the game, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and I mean we had a wide open path. Oh, we can all both say that different things, but our D coordinator said the best. The next day he goes, I was really upset with Lane because I didn't think he was catching the ball clean. He's like, I went back and watched the film. He goes, he looked like a hockey goalie back there trying to field these snaps. But I think the resilience of it, I just kept telling our kids, we're not going to make excuses. We're going to play through this, and we're either going to win or we're going to lose. But somebody's going to make the right amount of plays here. And our kids just really stuck to it and kept to it. And that was to me, it was just, that was just the big. We needed to have that big win to keep going on, or we were just going to be. I think somebody on your show said it's just time to go home. It's Farmington, and it's time to go home. And with that, I kept telling them that, is it time to go home? And they knew it wasn't. So I think it was just desire and wanting to play.
I think that was Kyle Kampmeyer of NUIC football saying those things.
No, I don't mind that. You all should have picked Rock Ridge. They came from a bigger conference. They'd all been there and done that. They've got a great coach. I mean, I think that was probably the right pick. I knew what we had. You hadn't been to practice, so.
Yeah. Coach, go back a year. We got to talk about the Angels Extra. Tell me about that play between Lane Wheelwright and brother Jack Wheelwright to crazy play to win a game over Elmwood Brimfield.
So it was Jack Grunwald.
Oh, yeah. Or
Jack
sorry.
Grunwald. It was just the end of the game, and we had really struggled. And I mean, hats off to Elmwood because they really outplayed us that game. And 4th and 4 from our own, or 4th and 6, maybe something like that, from our own. I don't know, 20. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it was your own 16.
Yeah, and I just told our kids, I said, "What do you think?" And they said, "We think go for it." And I said, "Well, either we're going to be winners or we're going to be losers. Let's see what kind of guts we got here. Let's throw a bomb to Jack. Let's go." And they did it, and we caught it and scored. And that was, it showed you what kind of players those two were. The whole team really, to buck up and do it. So, but it was special. It was special because I think it embodied what we were. They were young. They wanted to roll the dice, and heck, let's roll the dice. Let's do it. So it's it's freeing to make calls like that. But if it blows up, you're an idiot. But I just thought the way they ran the ball on us, they might score anyway. So what the heck? If people are calling me idiots, somebody's going to anyway tonight. So who cares? So.
Well, man, going back, I think we had misinformation. I thought that was a brother connection on that play, but no, it was Lane Wheelwright to Jack Grunwald. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Either way, I remember that game and talking about kind of the guts to make that call and say, here we are. We're going to try, we're going to go for it. So
anyway. I got a good, this is just a story off the cuff. So I have a guy on my staff. We call him Killer. Okay. He never played football, but he's a borderline genius. We just kind of keep him around. He doesn't coach, but he always tells me when you should do this, when you should do that. And the first time we beat Elmwood in 2016, it was a great game. And we were up like 2 scores. And we were on our own 25 coming out. And there were like 11 minutes left. And I said, it was like 4th and 1. I said, do we punt or go for it? All the kids, of course, are going to say go for it, right? And we had a good running back named Evan Marion. And everybody says, go for it, go for it. My line coach is telling me go for it. I look at Killer and he says, yeah, go for it. I give it to Evan Marion. He gets stuffed, no gain. Luckily, the defense, they still scored, but it took them a long time to get down there, and we ran the clock out and won. After the game, I said to Killer, I said, what are you doing? I said, this is why you're here. What are you doing? And he looked me dead in the eye and said, everybody in the house knew you were going to give it to him. I assumed you'd throw it. That's what he told me. So that's who I'm working with, Yeah.
It's good stuff. Well, Any other, players over the years or teams that maybe not, they don't necessarily have to be the best team or, the best player, but just ones that made an impact on you or made an impression on the program at the time?
I'll tell you, we had a kid named Ethan Evans, and when we got knocked out by Downs in 2021, he stopped all our young kids and pulled them together and told them his one regret was that he didn't hit the weight room like he attacked football games. And if they did that, they could succeed. I told him that 100 times, didn't take. He told him that once, and it's really changed the weight room these last 3 or 4 years. They've really gotten after it from that point. So, but I think we've had a number of like unique kids. We had a kid named Cade Lansford that played for us, and life's unfair. And in 16, he broke his kneecap when he was a junior, and then he returned in 17. But the kid would do push-ups on the sidelines, and he was like, I'm a human being. I would be jealous. Man, he was the most supportive kid. I remember walking off the field with him. I said, it's got to be hard for you. And he said, no. I went to school with these guys all along. I'm so happy for them. And I know I'm going to be right back out there with them. And it just, like the unselfishness I just wasn't used to from kids like that. So he's just a kid that always kind of embodied what we want from our program. And not everybody's like that, but I find myself striving to be like that at times, so just a special kid.
Yeah, that's great.
Coach, one thing that we like to talk about on this show is aesthetics. And looking at, your guys' uniform set, looks like you've got some options, maybe some recent additions, a black jersey, all gold look, just a fantastic helmet, one of the best that we cover, certainly in the area. Is that something you stay in the know of? Is that something that the kids decide, or how do you keep the look?
I like the look good stuff, but I've got young coaches, and that stuff really matters to them, right? And the players. The kids fundraise every year, so like, if you came to Farmington, you hear people say, the football team gets everything. We pay for all our own stuff. Like our kids pay for all of it. And I think that I'm a believer in, if the kids raise the money from that team, we should spend the money on that team. So that's kind of what we do. The helmet thing has become really special here now. And it was new when I got in there, and I really just called the helmet guy and I said, this is what we are. We've had the star with the F, but it just doesn't look modern. And he really did a nice job. And then, of course, added the pitchfork on the top. And that's here to stay, I think.
Yeah.
Should we be expecting anything new this year if fundraising goes well?
I don't know. I haven't talked to the seniors. They kind of get to decide that, but we'll see. The black and white is the Perryman football inspired uniforms.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
The original Friday Night Lights uniform. So, but I got to admit, they look sharp. But those we had made, put the seniors' names on them, and the seniors can keep them. So
yeah,
that's something interesting for them.
No, the helmet is a big win, like you said. The classic like star with the F has been there a long time, but to add the spear and the detail of the spear in the middle, and it just shines. That's got a pop to it. That's a great helmet.
Do you happen to know the history behind the Farmers nickname, or how that even came about?
I'm not sure. I just think it's such a farm community. It's always been. I do know this: that Farmington was a huge mining community as well. So they very easily could have been the miners, but they're the farmers. So
interesting, great, yeah. Well, hey, before we let you go, you promised a Pat Lowers story. So I hope Pat Lower's listening, because
if you know Pat Lower, he's probably the nicest guy you've ever met, right?
We've met him. He's a fan of the show. We like him.
I wish I can tell you that change happened somewhere between now and 1993. In 1993, I'm taking a beating from Pat Lower and the Aledo Green Dragons. I'm sure it's 40-something to nothing. And I want this to be a green light to any kid that gets a 15-yard penalty for Fulton, that they can just throw this out there as a defense if they want to this year. I got tackled, getting humiliated, bad enough, right? Pat Lower pulled my shoe off my foot and threw it to the sideline. I want everybody to know that happened. Pat's going to deny it. I love Pat. He's a good friend. Sometime I'm going to pull a shoe off him and throw it, though. We still got one coming.
Well, man, sometime if you you play Fulton and you meet at midfield as coaches, for that midfield meeting before the game, you got to try to go after his shoe and throw it.
I'm going right for the right sneaker, and it's going to the sideline. So
did he say anything, or he just launched it and that was kind of it?
I was so downtrodden at the time. He may have said something, but I don't even remember. So.
Oh man. Come on, Pat. I mean, now he's an IHSA official. Like, we can't be doing that kind of stuff.
The Coaches Association too, I believe. So, but if any young men up there in Fulton happen to make a mistake, you just throw that one out there, and that all should be forgiven.
No, so. That's amazing. That's good. That's good. Mitch, you got anything else for Coach Vallas here before we let him go?
No, Coach, I just want to say thanks for being on tonight, and certainly thanks for your support over the years. It's been great interacting with you online and just, again, being supportive of this show. We certainly hope we do that in kind to the Farmington program, because it's a program that we hold in high regard, and your success is well warranted. And so we wish you all the best of luck, and look forward to the season here. It'll be here before we know it, really.
Yep. Yeah, and I appreciate you guys having me. I think you're doing important work with kids need to be noted and picked out from every program with the newspapers in the dire shape that they're in, unfortunately. I think it's an important thing. So,
yeah, Coach, it's really been great to get to know you, get to know the program, and those texts on a Friday night or Saturday morning. It's always fun to kind of get your take and get the stats and get the info, the story we need. So we appreciate it. It helps our content, and it's just fun to make these relationships around the state. So really appreciate it, and good luck. Good luck in the off season. Have a good summer, and jump right in the fall.
Yeah, but we'll be the younger farmers this year than we were last year. So, but it'll be fun. I'm excited for the challenge. So
there you go. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Head Coach Toby Vallas of the Farmington Farmers. Thank you to everyone who listens. Another great coaching conversation. Mitch and I will be back about every couple weeks, I think, here. Mitch, we've, past seasons, we've taken kind of a spring break or, early summer break, but I think we're kind of back in the swing of things here. So we might just keep this rolling.
Yeah, we'll lose track of time before we know it, and fall practice will be starting. So yeah, I think we've got some great further coaching conversations lined up, and just, again, looking forward to the season.
All right. Well, thanks to everyone who listens. We'll talk again soon.